Former Coast Guard rescuer Grant Walker had spent years searching violent waters for signs most people would never notice. Yet nothing prepared him for a German Shepherd puppy standing alone beneath a broken ferry light during a Lake Superior ice storm. One paw pressed over a torn note tied to a blue scarf. Someone had written careful instructions to keep her safe. Someone else had removed the name, address, and every clue that could lead her home. Ice struck the windshield of Grant Walker's maintenance truck like handfuls of thrown gravel. Beyond the glass, Lake Superior had disappeared behind a moving wall of snow, leaving only the narrow service road and the intermittent glow of orange reflector posts. Grant kept both hands on the wheel as he drove away from the decommissioned Granite Point ferry station. Above the frozen shoreline, the old lighthouse produced one weak flash before darkness swallowed it again. At 42, Grant was a tall, broad-shouldered man whose body still carried the disciplined strength of his years as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. His dark brown hair was cut short, with traces of gray above his ears, and a narrow scar crossed his left eyebrow. Weather and sleepless nights had deepened the lines around his blue-gray eyes. He spoke calmly, rarely wasted words, and had an instinctive habit of studying doors, windows, currents, and people before allowing himself to relax. That instinct had once kept drowning sailors alive. It had also made Grant increasingly difficult to live with. During his final winter with the Coast Guard, Grant had reached a sinking fishing boat seconds too late to save one of its occupants. Although the investigation cleared him of responsibility, he carried the failed rescue into every part of his life. He became protective to the point of control, particularly with his daughter. When his marriage ended, Grant withdrew instead of explaining the fear beneath his behavior. He now repaired navigation lights, emergency batteries, and fog sensors along Michigan's Lake Superior shoreline, work that kept him close to danger without requiring anyone to depend directly upon him. That evening, a failed battery at Granite Point had delayed him nearly 2 hours. His phone rested face down in the cup holder. He did not need to check it to know what he had missed. His 16-year-old daughter, Lily Walker, had been waiting for him at her winter photography exhibition in Marquette. Lily was tall for her age, with a slender build, shoulder-length auburn hair, and the same observant gray-blue eyes as her father. She was intelligent, independent, and capable of finding emotion in images Grant would have dismissed as ordinary. An empty chair beside a frozen window, a single boot print in fresh snow, sunlight caught inside a cracked bottle. Years of broken promises had taught her to hide disappointment behind short messages and an expression that looked colder than she truly was. Grant had promised to arrive before 7. The dashboard clock read 7:26. A white cargo van appeared through the snow ahead of him, moving away from the old ferry station far too quickly for the conditions. Its right taillight was dark, and a faded magnetic sign clung crookedly to the rear door. Grant caught only a blur of blue lettering before the van passed. The vehicle fishtailed near the shoulder, corrected sharply, and disappeared into the storm. Grant watched it in his mirror for several seconds. Then something moved beneath the lighthouse. At first he thought wind had lifted a piece of cardboard across the abandoned loading area. The shape vanished behind a concrete barrier before reappearing beneath the broken ferry light. It was too small to be a deer, and too deliberate to be debris. Grant slowed. A German Shepherd puppy stood beside the locked terminal gate. She appeared no more than 9 weeks old. Black fur formed the beginning of a saddle across her back, while wet tan fur covered her legs, chest, and small face. Her paws looked too large for her thin body, and one oversized ear stood partly upright, while the other folded beneath the weight of freezing rain. She was frightened, but strangely quiet, watching the approaching truck without barking or attempting to run. Grant stopped at an angle that placed the truck between the puppy and the road. He switched on the hazard lights and set the parking brake. His camera continued recording through the windshield. The puppy lowered her body as he opened the door. "Easy," Grant said. He stepped onto the ice without slamming the door. The wind pulled at his jacket and drove crystals against his face. He approached sideways, avoiding direct eye contact, but the puppy retreated until her hindquarters touched the terminal gate. A blue scarf had been wrapped loosely around her neck. One front paw rested over a folded piece of paper tied to the scarf with white thread. Whenever the wind lifted the paper, the puppy pressed it down again. She appeared more afraid of losing it than of the stranger walking toward her. Grant stopped 10 feet away and lowered himself into a crouch. His phone vibrated inside his jacket. He ignored it and studied the puppy's breathing. It was rapid but steady. She bore weight on all 4 legs, though her body had begun to tremble. Ice had collected along the ends of her fur. There was no blood, no visible wound, and no collar beneath the scarf. Grant extended one gloved hand. The puppy did not move. The paper opened briefly in the wind, revealing several handwritten words. Grant shifted his flashlight until the beam crossed the page. "Her name is Willow." Another gust folded the paper closed. Grant remembered the final line from the hook's torn message. He removed one glove, lowered his bare hand until his knuckles nearly touched the ice, and whistled softly twice. Willow's half-folded ear lifted. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then she took one cautious step. Her nose tested the air before she crossed the remaining distance and touched his fingers. Her skin felt cold enough to tighten something inside Grant's chest. "That's it, Willow." She smelled his palm again, but immediately returned to the paper. Grant moved closer and inspected the scarf. It was not tight, and the thread had been passed through the fabric rather than tied around her neck. He carefully lifted the note without pulling it away from her. Willow followed every movement. The message was written in dark blue ink. "Her name is Willow. She is 9 weeks old. Whistle twice and keep your hand low. Please keep her warm." The bottom half had been torn away. Uneven fibers marked the missing section, suggesting someone had removed it hurriedly. A faint blue impression remained near the edge, but Grant could not make out the words beneath the moisture. His phone vibrated again. This time he looked. Lily had sent a photograph of an empty chair beside one of her framed pictures. They took everything down. "Don't bother coming." Grant stared at the message before typing that the beacon repair had taken longer than expected. He erased the sentence. He wrote that he had found a puppy in the storm and erased that as well. Every explanation sounded like another emergency chosen over his daughter. A second message appeared. "It's always something, Dad." Grant closed his eyes briefly. Willow shivered beside his boots. He could not repair both failures at once. Grant placed the note against the scarf, slid one hand beneath Willow's chest, and supported her hind legs with the other. She stiffened when he lifted her, then twisted toward the paper. Grant kept it where she could see and smell it. Inside the truck, he wrapped Willow in an emergency wool blanket. She immediately pushed her nose through the fold, searching for the blue scarf and note. Grant placed both between her front paws. Only then did she settle. Before leaving, he replayed the final minutes of the dashboard recording. The white van was visible turning away from the ferry station less than a minute before Willow appeared beneath the broken light. Grant bookmarked the footage. He could attempt to follow the van, but the puppy's trembling had worsened, and the storm was erasing its tracks. He lowered his hand beside the blanket and whistled twice. Willow pressed her cold nose into his palm. Grant turned the truck toward Marquette. Behind them, the dead fairy light disappeared into the snow, while Willow remained curled around the torn note as though it were the only piece of home she had left. 23 minutes after leaving Granite Point, Grant pulled beneath the illuminated sign of North Harbor Veterinary Clinic. Freezing rain glazed the parking lot, and only 2 windows remained lit inside the single-story brick building. Willow had stopped trembling violently, but she remained curled around the blue scarf and torn paper. Whenever the truck turned, she opened her eyes to make sure they were still between her paws. Grant carried her through the side entrance inside the wool blanket, keeping the note where she could see it. Doctor. Rachel Monroe was waiting in the treatment room. Rachel was 44, medium height, with a lean build, warm brown skin, and black curls streaked with silver gathered into a loose knot. Her hazel eyes were attentive without being intrusive. 15 years of emergency veterinary work had taught her that frightened animals reacted to human urgency long before they understood kindness. Early in her career, she had nearly lost a terrified dog because too many people crowded the examination table at once. Since then, Rachel had become known for moving slowly, even when every second mattered. "Set her on the warmed pad," she told Grant. "Keep the scarf close until she decides she doesn't need it." Grant placed Willow on the table. Rachel lowered the room lights, offered the back of her fingers, and waited. Willow smelled her hand, but kept one paw over the paper. Only after Grant whistled twice did she allow Rachel to begin. Rachel checked Willow's gums, listened to her heart and lungs, examined her abdomen, and gently moved each leg through its natural range. Willow's temperature was below normal, though not dangerously low. Her gums were slightly dry. Her blood glucose suggested she had missed more than one meal, and her thin belly confirmed that she had eaten very little that day. The ends of her paws were cold and irritated by ice, but there was no frostbite. Rachel found no broken bones, cuts, bruising, or swelling beneath the damp fur. "She's dehydrated, hungry, and mildly hypothermic," Rachel said. "But you found her before any of those became critical." She gave Willow warmed fluids beneath the skin, rubbed a small amount of glucose gel along her gums, and wrapped a second heated towel around her. Willow tolerated the treatment with a quiet watchfulness that seemed unusual for such a young puppy. She never snapped or struggled. She simply followed every hand that came near the scarf. Rachel passed the microchip scanner between Willow's shoulder blades, then along both sides of her neck and chest. The device remained silent. She repeated the scan with a second machine before shaking her head. "No chip. At 9 weeks it may have been scheduled with her first vaccinations." Grant looked at the torn note. "Which means it might have contained the only contact information she had." Rachel placed the paper inside a transparent medical sleeve so it could dry without losing more fibers. Under the treatment lamp, the missing lower section looked deliberate. The tear ran nearly straight across the page, with one deep diagonal cut near the right corner. Someone had gripped the paper firmly before removing the bottom half. Grant told Rachel about the white van and showed her the bookmarked dashboard footage. The storm had distorted the image, but the missing taillight and crooked blue sign were visible. Rachel watched the van leave the ferry station, then glanced toward Willow. "Save copies in more than one place," she said. "Tonight, it's a suspicious vehicle. Tomorrow, it may be the only evidence showing how she got there." Grant emailed the recording to himself and saved another copy to the clinic computer. His phone displayed 3 unanswered messages from Lily. He sent her the clinic's address and added that her camera was still locked inside his truck.
He expected no response. 12 minutes later, the side door opened, bringing a blast of winter air into the hallway. Lily entered wearing the black sweater and gray skirt she had chosen for the exhibition, now hidden beneath an oversized winter coat. Melted snow darkened the ends of her auburn hair. Her framed photographs were stacked inside a cardboard portfolio beneath one arm. She looked tired, embarrassed, and angry enough to keep her voice perfectly controlled. "I came for my camera," she said. Grant reached for his keys. Before he could move, Willow lifted her head.
Lily saw the puppy on the treatment table and stopped. Her anger did not disappear, but it shifted aside long enough for concern to enter. "Is that what you found?" Grant nodded. "Her name is Willow. At least, that's what the note says." Lily placed her portfolio against the wall. Rather than approach directly, she removed her wet coat, crouched several feet from the table, and held her hand below Willow's eye level. Grant noticed that she did it without being instructed. As a photographer, Lily had learned to make herself smaller around nervous animals. She waited for them to enter the frame instead of forcing the frame around them. Willow watched her for several seconds. Lily made 2 soft whistles. The puppy rose unsteadily, crossed the warmed pad, and pressed her nose into Lily's palm. Rachel brought a shallow dish containing softened puppy food mixed with warm water. Willow smelled it, but looked toward the protected note instead of eating. Lily moved the sleeve beside the bowl and sat on the floor. She placed a small amount of food on 2 fingers, lowered her hand, and waited. Willow took the first bite cautiously. The second came faster. Within minutes, she was eating from the dish while leaning against Lily's wrist. Grant had spent nearly half an hour gaining enough trust to lift her. Lily had crossed the distance in less than 5 minutes. "She likes you," he said. "She doesn't know me well enough to be disappointed yet," Lily replied. The words landed without volume, but struck harder than an accusation. Grant sat across from her, his back against the cabinet. He could have explained the failed beacon, the dangerous roads, or the puppy beneath the lighthouse. Instead, he said, "I promised I would be there, and I wasn't." Lily kept her eyes on Willow. "You always have a reason." "I know." "Tonight was important." "I know that too." Willow finished eating and climbed awkwardly into the space between Lily's knees. Her head settled against Lily's leg, while one paw remained extended toward the note. After Willow's temperature began to rise, Lily retrieved her camera from Grant's truck. She photographed the note through the clear sleeve, first from above and then with the treatment lamp positioned at a low angle. The oblique light revealed shallow marks on the reverse side, lines that could not be seen under ordinary illumination. Lily enlarged the image on the camera screen. A curved blue border appeared near the torn edge, followed by several pale letters. "This wasn't written on plain paper," she said. "It came from a printed form or company stationery." Grant leaned closer. The visible fragment read only, "Line Pet Tran." Beneath it was the upper curve of what might have been a phone number, but the rest had vanished with the missing half. Grant remembered the crooked blue lettering on the van. Rachel placed the original sleeve beneath a clean weight to finish drying and asked Lily to preserve the photographs at full resolution. The clue did not identify Willow's owner, but it proved that the torn section had contained more than a final sentence. Near midnight, Rachel checked Willow again. Her temperature had returned to a safe range, her glucose was improving, and she had kept down 2 small meals. With no microchip and no complete contact information, the clinic could not yet determine who owned her or where she had been intended to go. Willow slept beneath a warmed blanket, the blue scarf resting beside her face and the protected note within reach of one paw. Lily remained on the floor next to the table. Grant sat opposite her, separated by only a few feet and several years of things neither had known how to say. When Lily's hand slipped away from the blanket, Willow woke, crawled closer, and placed her chin across Lily's wrist. Lily looked at her father. "You can tell me about the lighthouse while she sleeps." Grant began with the failed beacon instead of the promises he had broken. It was not an apology large enough to repair everything, but Lily stayed and listened. Between them, Willow slept more deeply than she had since Grant found her, while the incomplete note waited beneath the clinic light. By late morning, Willow's temperature and glucose had remained stable long enough for Rachel to release her from the clinic. County Animal Control had found no matching lost dog report, but the official search had only begun. Officer Marissa Cole arrived to complete the temporary foster paperwork. Marissa was 48, short and solidly built, with cropped dark hair beginning to gray and a weathered face that made her appear stricter than she was. Nearly 20 years of retrieving frightened animals from roads, empty houses, and winter fields had taught her to distrust simple explanations. She spoke directly, documented everything, and never promised that a missing owner would be found. "The county hold lasts 30 days, she explained. "You provide food, shelter, and medical follow-up. We continue searching. If someone claims her, they'll need evidence that can't be found in the public posts." Grant signed the agreement. Lily saved photographs of Willow's markings, the blue scarf and the torn note, but Marissa instructed her not to publish every detail. The 2 whistles, the writing on the paper, and the white patch beneath Willow's neck would remain private ways to verify the real owner. Grant's house stood several miles outside Marquette, where a narrow road curved between pine trees before reaching the frozen edge of the lake. It was a cedar-sided home with a covered porch, a detached workshop, and windows that faced the water. Inside, everything had a designated place. Work boots rested beneath a bench. Keys hung on labeled hooks. Coast Guard photographs remained inside a drawer instead of on the walls. The living room contained a dark sofa, 1 reading chair, and a table wide enough for a person who rarely expected company. Lily had once told him that the house looked staged for someone who had not arrived yet. Willow changed it within an hour. A borrowed crate appeared beside the sofa. Towels covered the entryway. A water bowl interrupted the clean line of the kitchen wall, and 3 pieces of puppy food rolled beneath the refrigerator. Willow explored slowly, smelling the legs of every chair, before returning to the blue scarf. Grant had placed the protected note inside a clear document holder beside her bed. Whenever he moved it, even to straighten the blanket, Willow followed his hand until it returned. She slept for 20 minutes, woke at the sound of the furnace, and crossed the room to find Lily. Lily had intended to collect her camera and return to her mother's house after the clinic, but she stayed through the weekend. She photographed Willow near the window in natural light, avoiding the frightened roadside image that might attract attention for the wrong reasons. Her public post described a young female German Shepherd found near Granite Point during the storm. It included the veterinary clinic's number and the county case reference, but not the puppy's name, scarf, or response to the whistles. Within 2 hours, dozens of people shared it across community groups in Marquette, Munising, Escanaba, and the smaller towns along Lake Superior. Most comments offered help. Several people claimed to recognize Willow, though none could describe her hidden white marking or identify what had been tied around her neck. One man insisted she belonged to his cousin's neighbor, but stopped replying when Marissa asked for vaccination records. Another sent a photograph of a fully grown male shepherd from Wisconsin. Lily responded politely, while Grant stood behind her reading every message over her shoulder. "You don't have to supervise every sentence," she said. "I'm making sure you don't give anyone information they can use to fake a claim." Marissa already explained that. Grant stepped back. It was a small movement, but Lily noticed. Willow's first training sessions began in the kitchen. Grant used softened food and the two-note whistle to teach her to come from several feet away. The response appeared to have been established before she was abandoned. Each time he whistled, her ears turned toward him, although she hesitated if the note was out of sight. Grant added a hand signal, holding 2 fingers low beside his knee. By the second day, Willow could cross the room, touch her nose to his palm, and sit long enough to receive a reward. Grant approached the exercises with the precision of a rescue drill. He repeated each signal at the same distance, corrected his position, and watched the clock. Lily sat on the floor rolling a rubber ball between her hands. "She's a puppy, Dad, not a recruit." Clear signals keep her from getting confused. So does letting her have fun. Lily rolled the ball. Willow chased it, missed, slid across the kitchen floor, and returned with the edge of a towel instead. Grant reached to remove it, but Lily offered the ball in exchange. Willow released the towel without resistance. Grant tried the same method 5 minutes later. It worked faster than a command. For the rest of the session, he stopped watching the clock. That evening, a delivery truck slowed near the house. Its diesel engine was audible before its headlights crossed the windows. Willow woke instantly. She did not run toward the sound or bark with excitement. She flattened herself beneath the table, eyes fixed on the front door. When the truck accelerated away, she crossed the room, smelled the blue scarf, and pressed against Lily's ankle. Grant had seen dogs react to vehicles connected with fear. Willow's response did not prove who had placed her at Granite Point, but it challenged the idea that a loving owner had simply driven away and forgotten her. The note contained careful instructions from someone who understood how to comfort her. The van had arrived with part of that note and left with the identifying section removed. Grant began to suspect Willow's owner might believe she had reached somewhere safe. He did not tell Lily his theory as fact. Instead, he wrote the reaction and time in Marissa's foster log. Lily spent the following morning examining the dashboard footage on her laptop. She adjusted the contrast, isolated several frames, and reduced the glare from the snow. The van's magnetic sign remained blurred, but the enhanced image revealed a dark blue curve shaped like a wave and part of a paw above the letters North, Line, Pet, TR. It resembled the faint print on the back of Willow's note. The remaining letters were hidden by ice and the angle of the rear door. Lily saved the original file, the edited version, and a side-by-side comparison. "It's not enough to identify them," she said, "but it proves the van and the paper are connected." Grant looked at the careful labels she had given each image. Months earlier, he would have told her how to organize the files or warned her not to make assumptions. This time, he simply said, "You did good work." Lily looked at him as though she were waiting for a correction. None came. Over the next several days, the silent house acquired a new rhythm. Willow carried Grant's gloves beneath the table, fell asleep on Lily's discarded sweater, and learned that the refrigerator door often predicted food. She still checked the note before sleeping, but she no longer needed to touch it during every meal. When trucks passed, she woke and listened, though she recovered more quickly if Lily sat beside her. Grant noticed that Lily never demanded reassurance from Willow. She offered her hand and allowed the puppy to choose the distance. He began to understand that his daughter had been asking for the same respect. "I kept thinking being your father meant preventing every bad thing," he said one night as they sat on the floor beside Willow's crate. Lily rested her shoulder against the sofa. "You can't. I know that now. I don't need you to control everything. She paused, watching Willow dream beneath the blanket. "I need you to be there when you say you will." Grant did not defend himself. He listened. Before bed, Grant gave 2 soft whistles from the hallway. Willow left the scarf beside her crate and came to him without hesitation. She touched his hand, then turned and settled between him and Lily. The arrangement was temporary. The owner search remained open, and the incomplete logo had provided more questions than answers. But for the first time since Willow entered the house, she fell asleep without the torn note beneath her paw. 9 days after Willow entered Grant's house, Rachel cleared her for a supervised socialization program at North Shore Rehabilitation Center. The program allowed young dogs to become familiar with wheelchairs, walkers, elevators, and unfamiliar voices, while giving recovering patients a brief change from therapy routines. Grant agreed, because Willow still became nervous around large vehicles and sudden mechanical sounds. Lily joined him with her camera, though she kept it inside its case unless the staff or patients gave permission. North Shore stood on a low hill overlooking Lake Superior, its stone walls and wide windows designed to bring daylight into the therapy rooms. Inside, the air carried the clean smell of disinfectant, coffee, and winter coats drying near heating vents. Willow entered wearing a fitted blue harness, her leash secured around Grant's wrist. She moved cautiously across the polished floor, pausing at every automatic door. A young physical therapist with a shaved head, bright green shoes, and an easy voice demonstrated how the program worked. Willow would remain on leash. Patients would wait for her to approach, and Grant could end the visit whenever she showed signs of stress. Grant listened carefully. Lily noticed that he asked only 2 questions and did not attempt to rewrite the rules. The first room contained parallel bars, exercise steps, and several patients practicing controlled movements. Willow watched a wheelchair pass without retreating. She smelled the rubber tip of a cane, accepted a piece of food from Grant, and followed his lowered hand between 2 rows of chairs. Lily photographed her reflection in the dark window, rather than pointing the lens toward the patients. After 20 minutes, Willow's tail had begun to move. She responded to the 2-note whistle, sat beside Grant's boot, and allowed an elderly man to touch her shoulder. The visit appeared ordinary until music drifted from the far end of the building. The notes came slowly, separated by pauses, as though the person playing had to think about every movement before pressing the next key. Willow lifted her head. Grant felt the leash tighten, but she did not pull. The therapist opened a set of glass doors leading into a sunroom where an upright piano stood beside the windows. Several chairs faced the lake. Near the piano, a woman sat beside a silver walker, her left hand resting on the closed keyboard cover. The woman was 72-year-old Eleanor Pierce. She was tall even while seated, though recent weight loss had made her shoulders appear narrow beneath a pale blue cardigan. Her silver hair was cut neatly at her jaw, and fine lines framed clear green eyes that missed very little. Before her accident, Eleanor had carried herself with the straight-backed posture of the music teacher she had been for 38 years. Now she protected her left side whenever she shifted, and one shoe rested slightly farther forward than the other. 6 weeks earlier, she had slipped on ice outside her kitchen and fractured her hip. Emergency surgery repaired the bone, but recovery had forced her to surrender the independence she guarded fiercely. Since her husband's death 4 years earlier, Eleanor had refused to treat loneliness as a reason to become helpless. She tended her own garden, drove herself to appointments, and rarely asked neighbors for anything she believed she could manage alone. The fall had changed what her body allowed, but not the quiet determination with which she approached each day. Eleanor looked toward the doorway. Her gaze passed over Grant, stopped on Willow, and remained there. The color left her face. Her fingers tightened around the piano bench. Willow stood completely still, nose raised, as if sorting through scents beneath the disinfectant and winter air. Eleanor did not call out immediately. She lowered her right hand beside her knee, palm turned inward, and gave 2 soft whistles. Willow lunged forward. Grant caught the leash before it slipped through his hand, but the puppy did not move wildly or attempt to escape. She pulled in a straight line toward Eleanor, making a broken sound between a whine and a cry. Grant followed, shortening the leash enough to keep Willow from striking the walker. When they reached the piano, Willow pressed her nose into Eleanor's palm, smelled her wrist, and climbed halfway across her shoes. Eleanor bent as far as her healing hip allowed. "Willow," she whispered. The puppy's entire body moved with her tail. She circled the walker once, returned to Eleanor's knees, and lay across both of her feet. Eleanor placed one trembling hand behind Willow's left ear and rubbed a small spot in a slow circular motion. Willow closed her eyes instantly. Lily lowered her camera without taking a photograph. Grant crouched beside the harness, but kept hold of the leash. "How do you know her name?" Eleanor looked at him as though the answer should have been impossible to question. Then she saw the caution in his face and steadied herself. "There's a white mark beneath her throat," she said, "not on her chest. Higher, under the collar line. It curves to the right like a comma. Her left rear paw has one black nail between the pale ones. When she is tired, she sleeps with her front paw over her nose." Grant had seen every one of those details. He loosened the harness slightly and checked beneath Willow's neck. The white mark appeared exactly where Eleanor had described it. Lily moved closer, her expression changing from surprise to guarded attention. "Were you the person who left her at Granite Point?" she asked. "No." Eleanor's reply came quickly, but not defensively. "I paid someone to take her to a temporary foster family." She explained that Willow had come from an unplanned litter belonging to a former colleague. Eleanor had prepared for the puppy carefully. She bought a crate, arranged vaccinations, and placed feeding times on her kitchen calendar. After the fall, her surgeon estimated that she would spend several weeks in rehabilitation. A foster family outside Nagani agreed to keep Willow until Eleanor could return home safely. Because Eleanor was taken from the hospital directly to North Shore and could not drive, she hired a company called Northline Pet Transit. A driver collected Willow, her crate, food, blanket, and veterinary documents from Eleanor's house on the morning of her transfer. "He called that afternoon and said she had been delivered," Eleanor said. "I asked for a photograph. He told me the foster family would send one once she settled." No photograph arrived. Eleanor left messages from the rehabilitation center, but the driver stopped answering. The foster family's number had been written on the transport documents she no longer possessed. Her belongings remained boxed at home, and she believed delays in communication were the result of her emergency admission. "I thought she was safe," she said, looking down at Willow. "I have been asking the social worker to help me reach them." Grant remembered the blurred blue sign on the white van and the incomplete letters Lily had recovered. Northline Pet Transit matched both fragments. He removed the transparent document sleeve from the medical pouch attached to Willow's supply bag. Eleanor saw the blue scarf first. Her hand rose to her mouth. That was inside her crate. Grant then held up the torn note. Eleanor leaned forward, ignoring the discomfort in her hip. Recognition entered her expression before she read the first line. "I wrote this." Grant placed the sleeve on the piano bench. Eleanor traced the handwriting through the plastic without touching the damaged paper. She explained that the page had contained Willow's name, feeding schedule, calming signal, and medication information. The missing lower half had listed Eleanor's name, telephone number, veterinary clinic, and the address of the foster family. She had placed it inside a folder with the transport receipt. "It was never tied to her scarf," Eleanor said. "And it was not a goodbye note." Lily looked toward Grant. The message they had interpreted as a desperate final request had once been part of a complete plan. Someone had removed every detail that could return Willow to Eleanor, leaving only enough instructions for a stranger to keep the puppy alive. Grant did not release the leash, but he allowed it to rest loosely on the floor. "We'll have to verify everything," he said. "You should," Eleanor answered. "Please verify all of it." Willow rolled onto one hip and placed her chin across Eleanor's shoe. The woman beside the piano lowered her hand and made the familiar circular motion behind Willow's ear. For 9 days, Grant had wondered whether the puppy remembered the person connected to the scent on the paper. The answer now lay at Eleanor's feet. But as Willow looked back toward him from beneath her hand, Grant understood that finding her owner had created a question more difficult than the search itself. Lily began searching before they left North Shore Rehabilitation Center. Using the partial logo, the blue wave, the paw-shaped symbol, and the letters recovered from the dashboard footage, she found an archived business page for Northline Pet Transit. The company advertised private animal transportation throughout Michigan and Wisconsin, but its website had stopped accepting reservations 3 weeks earlier. The registered owner was Derek Sloan, a 39-year-old man with a narrow build, closely cropped sandy hair, and pale eyes that looked restless, even in his professional photographs. His carefully trimmed beard and embroidered company jacket gave him a dependable appearance. Former customers described him as polite, patient, and unusually good at calming worried owners. What they had not seen was that Derek's business had been collapsing beneath unpaid vehicle repairs, expired insurance, and personal debt. Instead of closing the company, he continued accepting transportation fees and used each new payment to cover an older obligation. Eleanor recognized him immediately. Derek had arrived at her house on time, spoken gently to Willow, and carried the puppy's crate to his van himself. He had even sent Eleanor a message claiming the delivery had been completed. Lily saved the archived pages before they disappeared and compared Derek's vehicle photograph with the van recorded at Granite Point. The missing right taillight, dent near the rear handle, and crooked magnetic sign all matched. County Animal Control transferred the information to Detective Nora Bell of the Marquette County Sheriff's Office. Nora was 37, compact and athletic, with straight black hair cut at her jaw, and dark eyes that remained calm when other people became emotional. She had spent 8 years investigating financial fraud before moving into general investigations. An early case built around an edited photograph had collapsed when the original file could not be authenticated, so she treated digital evidence with careful suspicion. Nora met Grant and Lily in a small conference room at North Shore. She asked Lily to explain every adjustment made to the image and requested the original camera files, the dashboard recording, and the exported versions. Lily had preserved all of them, including timestamps and a written list of her changes. Nora compared the footage with the archived photograph of Derek's van. "Your enhanced image helps us see the sign," she told Lily. "But the untouched recording proves the van was there." Grant expected Lily to look toward him for approval. Instead, she sat straighter and answered Nora's questions with the confidence of someone whose work had finally been taken seriously. Eleanor provided the payment receipt, text messages, and transport agreement from her email account. The foster destination belonged to Caroline Brooks, a 56-year-old retired pediatric nurse who lived outside Negaunee. Caroline was a broad-faced woman with short auburn hair, strong hands, and a practical manner shaped by decades of calming frightened children and exhausted parents. Since retiring, she had fostered dogs recovering from surgery or waiting for elderly owners to return home. She had prepared a crate beside her kitchen, purchased the food Eleanor specified, and waited throughout the night Willow was supposed to arrive. Derek sent 2 messages blaming icy roads, then stopped responding. Caroline eventually contacted Eleanor's telephone number, but the call went to the locked phone stored with Eleanor's belongings during her hospital transfer. Believing the delivery had been canceled because of the medical emergency, Caroline kept the empty crate for 3 days before offering it to another foster animal. Her messages established that Willow had never reached the agreed destination. Her copy of Eleanor's care sheet also showed what the complete document had originally contained. Nora located Derek the following afternoon at a rented garage on the southern edge of Marquette. His white van stood outside with a newly installed tail light, but the dent near the handle remained. At first, Derek claimed Willow had escaped during a fuel stop. He said he had searched for her and left the note beneath the fairy light in case someone found her nearby. The explanation failed immediately. Grant's dashboard recording showed the van leaving Granite Point less than a minute before Willow appeared at the locked terminal gate. The scarf had been deliberately placed around her neck, and the thread attaching the note had required time to secure. More importantly, Derek could not explain why he had told both Eleanor and Caroline that the delivery was complete. Nora obtained authorization to search the van and the rented garage. Inside the center console, investigators found a folded piece of paper stained with coffee. It contained Eleanor's name, telephone number, veterinary contact, and Caroline's address. The upper edge matched the torn fibers of the note Grant had recovered from Willow. Derek had removed the identifying section, crumpled it, and forgotten to dispose of it. The search uncovered records for 2 other unfinished transports. One belonged to a 7-year-old beagle named Milo, whose family believed he had been delivered to an elderly relative near Ironwood. The second involved Pepper, a black and white cat being moved to her owner's new apartment in Green Bay. Derek had accepted payment for both journeys and sent messages claiming delays before cutting off contact. Data from the van's navigation system showed stops inconsistent with the contracted routes. A recent destination led officers to a highway maintenance shed where Milo had been left inside an unlocked storage area with a blanket and water. A road worker had found him and brought him to a municipal shelter, where his microchip confirmed his identity. Another recorded stop led to a closed boarding kennel outside Escanaba. Pepper had been left in her carrier beneath the front awning, but an employee arriving early discovered her before the temperature fell. She was safe and had already been transferred to a local rescue after no owner information accompanied her. Nora contacted both families, and the animals were returned through official channels. Faced with the torn paper, navigation history, and Lily's authenticated footage, Derek stopped claiming that Willow had escaped. He admitted that his van's heating system had failed shortly after he collected her. Completing the transport would have required refunding part of Eleanor's payment and paying another driver. Already behind on bills, he chose to keep the money. He drove Willow to Granite Point, tore away the information that could connect her to him, and left the remaining instructions so whoever found her would know how to approach her. In his mind, the scarf and note transformed abandonment into an act of mercy. Nora did not allow him to hide behind that description. Willow had been 9 weeks old, the temperature had been falling, and the ferry station had been closed. Derek was arrested on charges connected to fraud, animal abandonment, and falsifying service records. The investigation remained open while officers reviewed additional transactions, but the 3 missing animals named in his records had been located alive. That evening, Lily submitted her original photographs and a signed description of how she had enhanced the logo. Eleanor's complete care sheet and the recovered lower half of the note were placed into evidence. The clinic retained a high-resolution copy for Willow's record. At Grant's house, Willow slept near the heater with the blue scarf beneath her chin. A passing truck woke her, but this time she looked toward Grant and Lily instead of hiding beneath the table. Grant whistled twice. Willow crossed the room and settled between them. The truth had removed one fear. Eleanor had not abandoned her. She had built a careful plan and trusted the wrong man to carry it out. Lily closed her laptop after reading Nora's confirmation that Milo and Pepper were safe. The mystery of the torn note had been solved. What remained could not be answered by evidence alone. 3 days after Derek Sloane's arrest, Grant returned to North Shore Rehabilitation Center with Willow and Lily. Eleanor waited in the sunroom beside the piano, dressed in dark trousers and a cream-colored sweater. Her silver walker stood within reach, and the blue exercise band used during therapy had been folded neatly across one handle. Willow recognized her before the glass doors opened. She pulled forward, gave a high, breathless whine, and pressed herself across Eleanor's shoes. Eleanor lowered one hand behind Willow's ear while Grant kept hold of the leash. After several moments, Willow turned, found Lily near the doorway, and touched her nose to the girl's knee. Then she returned to Grant and sat on his boot. The movement between them contained no hesitation. Willow had not forgotten Eleanor, but neither had she treated Grant and Lily as strangers. Eleanor watched the puppy move from one person to another. "I want her to come home," she said. Grant's hand tightened around the leash. He had known the words were coming, but knowing did not make him ready to hear them. Eleanor had legal records proving ownership, veterinary appointments made before her fall, and witnesses who confirmed the temporary foster arrangement. Nothing connected her to the abandonment at Granite Point. Grant understood that. His concern was not about what Eleanor had done. It was about what might happen next. Willow had gained nearly 6 pounds since the night of the storm. Her legs were growing longer, her chest broader, and her energy more difficult to contain. Within a year, she could weigh 70 pounds. Eleanor still required a walker for longer distances, and her healing hip limited how quickly she could turn. One sudden pull toward a squirrel or passing dog could bring her back to the operating room.
Wanting her home isn't the same as being able to manage her safely,
Grant said. Eleanor's expression tightened, though her voice remained controlled.
I know the difference. She's small now. She won't stay that way. I know that too.
Grant began listing the narrow front steps, icy paths, feeding bowls, leash pressure, and the distance to the nearest veterinary clinic. Each concern was reasonable. Together, they sounded like a decision he had already made on Eleanor's behalf. Lily stood beside the piano with her arms folded.
You're doing it again,
she said. Grant looked at her.
Doing what? Taking every possible bad thing and using it to decide what someone else is allowed to do.
He reminded her that Eleanor was recovering from surgery and that Willow was a powerful breed. Lily did not argue with either fact.
After the divorce, you checked my location every hour.
You wouldn't let me photograph the harbor at sunset because the path might freeze. You called it keeping me safe, but you never asked what I needed. Grant lowered his voice. You were 14. And now Eleanor is 72. That doesn't mean you get to make every choice for her. Eleanor looked away, giving them privacy without leaving. Grant felt the familiar urge to explain himself, to remind Lily of winter accidents, emergency calls, and all the things that could happen during a moment of carelessness. Yet the fear beneath those reasons had little to do with Eleanor's hip. Grant had already imagined Willow's bowl disappearing from his kitchen and her crate leaving the corner beside the sofa. He had imagined coming home to a quiet house and hearing nothing move behind the door. Protection had given him a respectable way to avoid saying that he was afraid of losing her. Rachel joined them that afternoon after reviewing Willow's medical progress and Eleanor's rehabilitation notes. She listened without taking sides, one hand resting on the back of an empty chair. This does not have to be decided as a choice between returning Willow today and separating them permanently, she said. She proposed supervised visits inside North Shore, where Eleanor's strength and balance could be evaluated around the puppy. Grant or Lily would keep control of a second safety lead. The therapists would teach Eleanor how to manage doors, feeding routines, and leash transitions without twisting her healing hip. Willow would learn to stop at thresholds, move to a mat when Eleanor used her walker, and return reliably to the two-note whistle. Rachel also made one condition clear. Affection alone would not determine the outcome. Eleanor needed a practical plan for exercise, veterinary transportation, and emergencies. Grant expected Eleanor to resent the requirements. Instead, she asked Rachel to write them down. "I am not asking anyone to pretend I'm stronger than I am," Eleanor said. "I'm asking for the chance to become strong enough." The first supervised session began the following morning in the physical therapy room. Eleanor practiced standing from a chair while Willow waited on a rubber mat several feet away. Grant held the safety line but gave Eleanor the primary leash, which had been fitted with a padded handle. The first attempt lasted less than 30 seconds. When Eleanor pushed herself upright, Willow rose excitedly and moved toward her. Eleanor shifted too quickly, felt pain in her hip, and returned to the chair. Grant stepped forward, but the therapist raised one hand, signaling him to wait. Eleanor took a breath and tried again. This time, Lily gave Willow the mat command before Eleanor stood. Willow remained in place long enough for Eleanor to balance behind the walker. Eleanor then lowered her hand and whistled twice. Willow crossed the room at a controlled pace and touched her nose to the waiting palm. Eleanor rewarded her without bending. Grant recorded the result in the training log, including the failed first attempt. Eleanor insisted that the failure remain there. "A plan that hides the difficult parts isn't a plan," she said. Over the next week, the sessions became more demanding. Eleanor practiced opening a weighted door while keeping the leash away from the walker's wheels. She learned to place Willow's food on a raised platform so she would not need to bend to the floor. The therapist scattered rubber toys across a mock living area, forcing Eleanor to identify tripping hazards before moving through it. Willow learned that the appearance of the walker meant she should go to her mat rather than circle Eleanor's feet. Some sessions went well. During others, Willow forgot every command when a therapy ball rolled across the room. Eleanor never blamed her. She waited, reset the exercise, and began again. Grant noticed that she did not try to prove strength by hiding pain. When her hip tired, she sat down. When she needed help, she asked for it. Those choices did more to weaken his objections than any display of determination could have done. During the final session of the week, Eleanor crossed the full length of the room using her walker. Willow moved beside her on a loose leash, stopped at the doorway, and waited for the whistle before continuing. Halfway across, the puppy looked back at Grant. He expected her to leave Eleanor and run to him. Instead, Willow checked that he was still there, then continued toward the piano. Grant understood the gesture. She did not need to abandon one person to love the other. Eleanor reached the bench and sat carefully. "I'm not asking you to hand her over today," she said. "Let me prove that bringing her home would be safe." Grant looked at Lily, then at Willow resting between Eleanor's shoes. "Supervised visits," he said. "We take it one step at a time." Eleanor nodded. No one had won, and no one had surrendered. For the first time, they were solving the same problem together. 2 weeks after the supervised visits began, Eleanor was cleared to leave North Shore Rehabilitation Center. Before Willow could spend time at her house, Rachel requested a home safety review. Grant and Lily drove to Eleanor's neighborhood on a gray Saturday morning, following narrow streets lined with bare maples and snowbanks darkened by road salt. Eleanor's home was a single-story yellow house with a narrow porch and a fenced backyard. It looked welcoming, but Grant identified problems before reaching the front door. One porch step lacked a handrail. The gate latch required both hands to open. Ice had formed beneath an unlit section of the roof, and several fence boards shifted when the wind struck them. Inside, loose rugs covered the hallway. Electrical cords crossed one corner of the living room, and Willow's feeding area had been placed where Eleanor would need to bend beside the kitchen walkway. This time, Grant did not present his observations as reasons Willow could not return. He asked Eleanor which problems she wanted to address first. She looked at the porch, then at the impatient puppy waiting beside Lily. "The things that could make both of us fall," she said. Eleanor's neighbor, Marisol Vega, arrived carrying a toolbox and a container of coffee. Marisol was 63, broad-shouldered and sturdy, with a long silver and black braid and warm brown eyes. She had spent 35 years delivering mail through Michigan winters and possessed a practical understanding of dangerous steps, broken gates, and people too proud to request assistance. After her own husband suffered a stroke, she had learned that independence often depended on several reliable people quietly sharing the work. Marisol lived across the street and had known Eleanor for nearly 18 years. She had assumed Willow was safe with the foster family and was angry with herself for not asking more questions. Eleanor refused to let her accept blame for Derek Sloane's actions. "What matters is who answers now," she said. Grant installed a handrail along the porch while Marisol replaced the low gate latch with one Eleanor could operate using a single hand. Lily tested the motion sensor lights, walking the path repeatedly until every dark section of the yard became visible. Over the next 3 days, the house changed without losing the details that made it Eleanor's. Loose rugs were removed or secured with non-slip backing. Grant moved the electrical cords behind the furniture and repaired the fence boards. A raised platform placed Willow's food and water within Eleanor's reach without forcing her to bend. Lily positioned rubber mats beside the front door, kitchen, and piano. Each mat became a designated place where Willow would remain whenever Eleanor moved with her cane or walker. The training required patience. At first, Willow followed the cane as though it were a toy. Lily redirected her with a small piece of food, gave the mat command, and rewarded her only when all 4 paws remained on the rubber surface. Eleanor then crossed the room while Willow watched. By the end of the week, the sound of the cane touching the floor caused Willow to move toward the nearest mat on her own. Grant observed from the doorway. Lily did not repeat commands unnecessarily or correct Willow with frustration. She created a clear choice and allowed the puppy to make it. Grant recognized how different that was from trying to control every possible movement. A professional dog walker was added to the plan for the days Eleanor's hip became tired. Noah Price was 24, tall and lean, with freckled cheeks, curly red hair, and a faded green jacket covered with dog treats in nearly every pocket. He was studying to become a veterinary technician and had grown up with 2 German shepherds, giving him a calm respect for the breed's intelligence and strength. Noah demonstrated how he would secure Willow's harness, record the distance of each walk, and report changes in her appetite or behavior. He agreed to visit 3 afternoons each week and remain available during heavy snow when Eleanor could not safely use the yard. Grant tested him with detailed questions about leash pressure, emergency recall, and interactions with unfamiliar dogs. Noah answered without becoming defensive. When Grant finally ran out of concerns, Lily gave him a look that said he had nearly conducted a Coast Guard inspection. He surprised her by smiling and telling Noah the schedule would work. Eleanor created an emergency folder and placed it inside a kitchen cabinet marked with a blue label. Rachel's clinic appeared first, followed by Grant's number as Willow's emergency caregiver. Marisol would keep a spare key and check the house if Eleanor failed to answer her telephone. Caroline Brooks remained available as a temporary foster if Grant was out of town. Noah's walking schedule, Willow's feeding instructions, vaccination records, and 2-note recall command were written in clear sections. Eleanor also included a signed authorization, allowing Grant to make veterinary decisions if she became unable to do so. The plan did not assume Eleanor would always be strong. It made certain that a difficult day would not become another crisis. Grant read the folder twice before signing his section. Seeing his name beneath the words "Emergency Caregiver" affected him more deeply than he expected. Eleanor was not trying to remove him from Willow's life. She was giving him a permanent place inside it. Willow's first visit lasted 3 hours. She explored every room with her nose close to the floor, found the old blanket that had once been kept inside her crate, and slept beside Eleanor's piano. When Grant returned, Willow ran toward him, but looked back before reaching the door. The next visit lasted until evening. During the first overnight stay, Marisol remained across the street, and Grant kept his phone beside his bed. Willow woke when a snowplow passed, but instead of circling Eleanor's walker, she moved to the bedroom mat. Eleanor lowered her hand, whistled twice, and waited until Willow touched her palm. They both returned to sleep. The following weekend, Willow stayed from Friday afternoon until Sunday morning. She ate normally, walked with Noah, and spent most of Saturday carrying one of Grant's gloves from room to room. When Grant arrived to collect her, she greeted him with excitement, then returned to touch Eleanor's hand before climbing into the truck. That same weekend, Lily's second winter exhibition opened at the Marquette Community Arts Center. An hour before Grant planned to leave, his work phone rang with a report of an unstable navigation light east of the city. Months earlier, he would have collected his tools and sent Lily another explanation. Instead, he contacted the on-call technician, provided the maintenance history, and allowed someone else to handle the problem. He arrived at the exhibition 10 minutes early. Lily stood beneath the gallery lights, wearing the same black sweater from the night he had missed. Her photographs showed Willow's empty scarf beside the clinic blanket, Eleanor's hand resting near the piano, and a muddy paw print crossing Grant's perfectly ordered kitchen floor. Grant stopped longest before a photograph of the rubber mat beside Eleanor's cane. The title beneath it read, "Learning Where to Stay." Lily approached without mentioning the work call she knew he had received. "You came." "I said I would." Grant remained until the gallery closed. His phone stayed silent in his pocket, and for once, he did not look toward the door whenever someone entered. Later, he and Lily drove to Eleanor's house to check on Willow near the end of her first full weekend. Through the living room window, they saw Eleanor reading beside the piano while Willow slept across her feet. The motion light illuminated the repaired gate, the secured walkway, and 2 sets of footprints leading safely to the porch. Grant did not knock. The purpose of the trial was to learn whether Willow could rest there without him. She could.
Lily slipped her hand into his, and together they returned to the truck, leaving Willow inside a home that had been rebuilt not around one person's strength, but around several people's promise to help. 6 weeks after Willow's first overnight stay, Rachel completed the final home care review.
Eleanor's hip had continued to strengthen. The emergency plan had been tested, and every scheduled visit from Noah and Marisol had been recorded. Willow now stopped at doors, moved to her mat whenever Eleanor picked up her cane, and returned reliably to the 2-note whistle. There had been imperfect days. She once dragged a muddy branch through the kitchen, chewed the corner of a piano bench, and forgot every command when a squirrel crossed the backyard. None of those incidents endangered Eleanor. More importantly, Eleanor never concealed difficulty to prove herself capable. When her hip became tired, she called Noah. When freezing rain covered the walkway, she asked Marisol for help rather than risking a fall. Grant gradually understood that safety did not require one person to anticipate everything. It required several people willing to answer when something changed. The final paperwork was completed at North Harbor Veterinary Clinic. Marissa restored Willow's custodial record to Eleanor, while Grant signed a permanent emergency care authorization. If Eleanor entered the hospital, lost mobility, or needed temporary assistance, Willow would immediately stay with Grant. Rachel remained the primary veterinarian, and Caroline Brooks stayed on the list as an additional foster contact. Eleanor read each page carefully before signing. Grant took longer. Willow lay beneath the table with her head across his work boot, chewing one end of a rubber toy. When Grant finally placed his signature beside the words "Emergency Caregiver," Willow looked up, but did not move. Eleanor reached across the table. "You are not losing her," she said. Grant glanced at Lily, who sat beside the examination counter with her camera in her lap. "I know," he answered. This time, he meant it. Willow returned to Eleanor's home during the week and spent most weekends with Grant and Lily. The arrangement soon became ordinary. On Friday afternoons, Eleanor packed Willow's food and blue scarf into a canvas bag. By Saturday morning, Willow was following Grant through the workshop, stealing gloves and falling asleep beneath Lily's desk while she edited photographs. On Sunday evening, she recognized the turn toward Eleanor's street and stood with her front paws against the truck window. She greeted Eleanor with the same excitement she showed Grant 2 days earlier. No one treated those reactions as evidence that she preferred one home over the other. Willow did not divide her affection according to paperwork. She carried Eleanor's dish towels to Grant's house and returned with Lily's socks. Toys purchased in one kitchen appeared beneath furniture in the other. Grant kept a bowl beside his back door, and Eleanor left one of his spare work jackets on her porch for cold evenings. Derek Sloan's prosecution concluded before the last snow melted. The evidence established that he had accepted payment for transports he never completed, falsified delivery confirmations, and abandoned animals in unsafe locations. He pleaded guilty to fraud and animal abandonment charges, was ordered to pay restitution, and was prohibited from operating an animal transportation business. The investigators continued reviewing his records, but no additional missing animals were found. Milo, the beagle, returned to his family near Ironwood and quickly reclaimed his favorite chair. Pepper reached her owner in Green Bay and reportedly spent her first night hiding beneath a bed before emerging for breakfast. The lower half of Eleanor's care sheet remained in evidence until the case closed. When it was finally returned, Rachel placed both pieces together inside a protective frame. The tear remained visible across the center, but every missing name and number could once again be read. Lily entered a photograph in the Upper Peninsula Young Artists Competition that spring. The image showed Willow standing in the open doorway of Eleanor's house. Grant was visible on the porch, one hand lowered beside his leg. Eleanor stood inside near the piano with her palm extended. Willow occupied the space between them, looking toward neither person, because her attention had been caught by something in the yard. Lily titled the photograph, "Two Homes, One Promise." It won the competition's Youth Documentary Award. At the ceremony, Grant sat in the front row, 10 minutes before the program began. His work phone remained turned off. When Lily accepted the award, she thanked Eleanor for allowing her to photograph the recovery, and Grant for finally learning that being present did not require solving everything. The audience laughed softly. Grant did too. The attention surrounding Lily's photograph brought calls from older pet owners who recognized Eleanor's original fear. Some lived alone. Others had relatives hundreds of miles away. Several admitted they had no plan for their animals if an ambulance took them from home. Rachel had encountered the same problem repeatedly at her clinic. Grant understood emergency systems, transportation, and practical safety. Eleanor knew how easily independence could become isolation. Together, they established Lake Superior Pet Bridge, a community program connecting elderly and recovering owners with temporary foster homes, dog walkers, veterinary transportation, and emergency caregivers. Rachel coordinated medical information. Grant inspected gates, walkways, and feeding areas. Eleanor helped owners create written care plans before a crisis. Lily photographed foster animals and designed simple emergency cards that could be placed on refrigerators or inside wallets. Marisol kept spare keys for 3 residents on her street. Noah expanded his walking schedule, and Caroline opened her home to animals whose owners required short hospital stays. The program did not depend on heroic rescues. Most of its work consisted of ordinary preparations: a telephone number written clearly, a bag of food stored in advance, a neighbor willing to cross the road, and a promise made before fear narrowed someone's choices. Grant found comfort in that kind of service. During his Coast Guard years, help had often arrived through helicopters, rescue lines, and seconds measured against freezing water. Pet Bridge worked more quietly, but the principle was the same. People survived frightening moments because someone had prepared to answer. By early May, grass had replaced the snow beneath Eleanor's repaired gate. Lily spent more time at Grant's house, not because a custody schedule required it, but because she wanted to. Sometimes she accompanied him while he inspected shoreline lights and photographed the lake from a safe distance he no longer chose for her. Grant attended her school events, answered questions without turning them into instructions, and kept the promises he made. Their relationship did not return to what it had been before the divorce. It became something stronger, because both of them had helped rebuild it deliberately. One Sunday evening, Grant and Lily brought Willow back after a weekend at the lake. Eleanor opened the front door before the truck stopped. Willow jumped down, raced across the walkway, and pressed herself against Eleanor's legs. Then she turned and ran back to the truck. She climbed onto the passenger floor, pulled the old blue scarf from her travel bag, and carried it toward the house. Grant expected her to place it beside Eleanor's chair. Instead, Willow dropped it across the open doorway, one end resting inside the living room and the other lying across the porch. Eleanor stood on one side. Grant and Lily stood on the other. The scarf had once been tied around a frightened puppy because someone wanted to erase the path leading home. Now it rested across an open threshold, connecting everyone who had promised that Willow would never be left without help again. Willow sat beside it, looked from Eleanor to Grant, and thumped her tail against the floor. She did not have to choose between 2 families. Both doors opened for her. Both places were home. Maybe God does not always send miracles through thunder or signs in the sky. Sometimes, He sends them through a puppy waiting beneath a broken light, a daughter willing to forgive,
or a stranger who chooses to answer the phone. Willow was rescued once from the storm, but in the end, she helped rescue everyone around her from loneliness, fear, and regret. Do you believe Grant made the right decision by returning Willow to Eleanor? Could you love an animal enough to let her live with someone else?
Share your answer, your story, or a prayer in the comments. We would truly love to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to Houndlight Stories for more unforgettable stories of courage, faith, loyalty, and second chances.